Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Nature Folklore. It's 5th of December, 2021. Well, that didn't work very well, did it? Great beginning there. Okay, we'll try again. It's the 5th of December, 2021. Nature Folklore. Let's see if we can get the intro video going now. Well, thank you everyone for joining me on our weekly time of exploring nature-centered folklore, connecting this with your favorite sanctuary space and expressing your inspired visions from your sanctuary through your poetry, writing, arts, craft, performance, and problem solving. Now, this afternoon's theme is part of one of our four Yule season series, and it's Mischief and Mystery. Let's get the picture up for you on that one. There we go. I'm a bit sluggish again. Yeah, of course, here we go. Pictures coming and going. There's been tech matters, as usual, right up to the second before I said hello to you. But Mischief and Mystery it is, and it's going to feature some origins of midwinter tree celebrations, such as folklore origins of our Christmas trees. And there's going to be lots on folk drama fun, the healing rituals that have become mumming, guising, straw boys, and red boys. And I was going to cover a bit about songs from ancient times that have been adapted and have become our carols today, but I'm not going to have time because we've got a very full show today. It's going to run into overtime. So I'm going to do a special on carols for subscribers. I hope I find the time for that for you, or try very hard this week. Anyway, guest today, we got some lovely guests. Artist and writer Jessica Bowman. She hasn't arrived yet, but she's going to talk a little about a beautiful solstice painting that she's created. And that's the painting. You might have seen me post it on the Facebook. And that's part of her beautiful nature folklore art and writings that she does. And here's another one of her pictures there. Absolutely raise a smile, doesn't it? And he's already in the back room here, in the green room sort of thing. It's Tony Cookson, and he's got a riddle story for this time to share with us. So these nature, as usual, as I say, these nature folklore sessions, videos, tree sanctuary guidance, for a while yet, the Labyrinth Gardens here, all brought to you thanks to the support of you appreciating subscribers. They subscribe through Patreon and also our PayPal donators as well. And yeah, I always think that's it. That's where you go to help us out. Thanks very much for that, because some of you subscribers are watching today as you watch every Sunday, which is absolutely wonderful. So thanks for your continued support, because without this support, I wouldn't be able to have fun being here sharing this show with you. So let's see what lovely early birds have come to join us so far for this wonderful session about. A few comments here. B. Smith here is making sure Tony behaves himself. Yeah, she. Sorry for him. That was one of the tech issues, this stuff coming on and off the screen. So excuse me if I'm going to click around a bit. Hopefully it will sort itself out as we go along. We've got Terry Stack Hardwick. Good morning from Maryland. And Gary's here. Ho, ho, is he? Hi, ho. John and everybody from Gary. And Sherry Murphy here. Good morning from down East Maine. I hope everybody's doing well. I think we've captured all of you to hear at the moment, and people will be joining us as they usually do as we roll along with this. Claire's here. I see Claire's popped in. There we go. Claire Roach, good afternoon. Catch this later, going to help out with the grandchildren. And anyway, to continue the show, right. Do some hiding. It's funny, it hides when I wanted to show and then doesn't go away when I wanted to hide. Oh, we've got Ken Wood Sculptor, who's joined us from Northern Michigan. Ken Wood Sculptor. Oh, tied me. Ken Wood Sculpture Nash. And Chandler Nichols has popped in as well. Good morning from Alabama. So move on with the show for a bit, and I'm going to come back and say hello to everybody as soon as I can. But on Facebook a couple of days ago, I saw this lovely painting representing how this artist represented winter, if I can find it. Here it is. This is Jessica's painting here. And a month or so before and after, this artist, she's Jessica Bowman, and hopefully she'll be back screen, and we'll have her on very shortly. And this Facebook posting was made by Dee Lalibert. I don't know who she is, but I thought it was lovely that she posted this. And this was posted on Facebook through the Folklore, Customs, Legends and Mythology group. And these long, interesting posts, it reminded us of how winter solstice is no longer celebrated like it once was. We no longer use this darker, cooler time of this seasonal cycle for restorative hibernation like we once did. And today, the modern culture may be regarded as a wind down season of being lazy and being selfish. If we actually go off and relax somewhere and hibernate, there's that sort of peer pressure of laziness with that, unfortunately, I think. And I think it's getting worse. So instead, we're pressured into using this darker season for living under many more hours of artificial lights, overworking, overspending, stressing out, overeating comfort foods, of course, increasing our alcohol guzzling, and accelerating our overall consumerism. And Dee points out that not everyone has friends with big fires for everyone to huddle around and drink and eat and all the rest of it. Or they may not have large festive families to share their consumed loot with. So many people can feel very left out at this time, very lonely, of course. So with this Yule season series, this 4-part series, and along with these comments, I'll bring this picture up again, I think, because it does show my point very well. I'll try to include some reassurance and support of the life recharging benefits of just winding down and enjoy and accept this hibernation. Just allow ourselves to embrace this annual time for peace, reflection, and letting go. This is the cycle of the year that we're in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. And we can become afresh, full of life for the next new seed beginnings, starting on Imbolc and right through the spring. But this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about some social traditions. And this is a lovely one. We used to do this inside in the cottage here, but there's an outside picture in the snow. And so I put that one up this year instead. But these traditions, they don't need items, that you don't need to be consumable. You just use what's around you. And my intent this afternoon is to share some less familiar nature-based observances, gratitudes, celebrations, and recognitions. And you got a hint what's going on behind me here in the screen. I'm going to be presenting some winter tree traditions. Also, as you see from behind me again, some of the folk drama, mumming, that type of thing. But I was going to do ancient winter songs and caroling. As I say, I'm going to make that into a special for subscribers. Now, unfortunately, I was going to have Jessica on right now to join her live, but she hasn't arrived. I hope she hasn't been sending messages that she's got a problem. Hopefully she will make it anyway. She's not here at the moment to talk about her painting, so we'll carry on. And viewers are just joining us anyway. They're clubbing around, and they'll continue to join. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the origins of Christmas tree folklore and customs. And what most of us are familiar with is this evergreen that we call Christmas tree. These Christmas trees. And I have heard them described as being a symbolic triangle shape to represent the Trinity. But these celebration trees, they've now entered beyond Christian ceremony. They're in all kinds of different religious cultures. And when I was in Florida, when I lived in Florida, I had a Jewish friend, and he had a huge Christmas tree yard. Let's see if I can get a picture up. And he sold trees to Jewish friends, Buddhists, Hindus, Islamic people. So the Christmas tree tradition that we practice today, it's all over the world, but it seems to have started as a Lutheran tradition in Germany. And it's since Martin Bucer, I think he's named, he erected a Christmas tree in Strasbourg in 1539. And it was an idea that took off, gained popularity. Prince Albert, husband of Queen Victoria, he was a German-born man, and he put up a decorated Christmas tree in Buckingham Palace during Christmas 1835. And let's see if his tree will stay up here. It is now. And this became a tradition right through the UK. And it was done as a form of patriotism there, 1841, especially through England, maybe Wales. So it's just to follow as an honor to Albert and Victoria rather than a Christmas thing, I suppose. But as the British people erected and decorated trees, they became more used to it as a routine in the home. And so people did this in their homes years later. And the tradition of tree in the home, it became a commercial success in the USA by the 1870s. And that's I think, is that a USA crowd? No, it isn't. That's a home crowd, I think. Let's see. There's some USA people putting their tree up in the 19th century. And they were doing this by the 1870s, especially in the cities around the USA, and it was spreading fast. And then by 1960, as always happens, when there's a tradition goes to the USA, it comes back to us, and it returned to the Europeans as the everlasting artificial Christmas tree around the 1960s. And these were miracle trees that we could fold up and put back up into the log or out in the shed after every Christmas celebration. And then what about the four-pointed stars? They were the first things to be put on the trees. They were on the top of the trees by the 1890s. And then we started putting fairies on the trees. They became the alternative. This was happening by the 1930s. And that's a lovely old vintage card there. And there's another example, a modern one of fairy up as well. And then we're all familiar with the sort of very ancient symbol of the five-pointed star. They started to appear on top of the trees, on top of our Christmas trees, probably from the 50s, replaced the four-pointed star. And I got a couple of pictures of this as well. There's here, and here's another one. There's a nice jolly one for you. But a much older tradition than Christmas trees is the wassailing blessings. And this is the blessing of apple trees. And there's a picture of some modern people wassailing there, or wassailing, as some people like to say. And I'm going to present that on a Nature Folklore session on 26th of December, right after Christmas. And strangely enough, that sort of Germanic origin, I'll be telling you a tale about that, because we saw cause a revival in northeast Germany with wassailing. And that's fascinating because apples are actually they were a staple winter food well before potatoes were. Potatoes is a few hundred years since they arrived here. But apples were the staple winter food for the health food, even before carrots ever were. And I love it. The sort of, when you bite into an apple, that sort of vapor that comes out. And it's believed that enchants us into making a wish. And that's accompanied by a belief that dreams come true, all thanks to an apple. And I'm going to talk more about that, the divination of apples during a session, and of Ogham as well, on the 16th of January. Now, another custom, and many believe this is a horrible tradition, especially in Ireland, is the banging of coins into trees to make a wish. And this is a sort of example. Well, there's an example there. And how that idea of sacrificing coinage this way for prosperity. I don't know how it started, because the peasants really didn't have any currency or very little of it. So why would they waste it banging on a tree as an old tradition? Of course, that seems nothing. Oh, Jessica's arrived. That's lovely. So we'll have Jessica on soon. But people didn't have currency in ancient times. Of course, people have coins in their pockets now. Sometimes they can't exactly bang their card up on a tree. I hope people just don't start doing that. But maybe they had bits of currency because lairds gave the peasants, the people on their land, they gave them bits of currency when they went wassailing door to door. And again, I'll talk about that after Christmas on the 26th, when I cover wassailing and wassailing. And there's also a belief that banging in a coin, if you bang coins in, this is a fallen tree, and it's believed that if you bang coins into trees, it'll kill them, that the metal of the coins will kill them. I believe that for many, many, many years. And then I discovered not long ago that that's actually far from true. And when you bang coins into a tree, you're actually feeding them. The metal actually helps. But I'm sure, like many of you, I'm still very uncomfortable about this tradition and practice of banging any metal into trees. I just don't like it. Banging in coins in trees or even other metals is still a huge custom, though. And they actually call these trees wish trees where they bang the coins in. And wish trees are a very popular custom in Scotland, and also in Cumbria and Northumbria in England, which is on the Scottish border. And this is, they do this to accompany the A Fond Kiss tradition. So when a coin is banged into a tree with one blow, a man gets to bang a tree with one blow, and this is to demonstrate to his lady friend his prowess. And after that one blow of the coin in the tree, they kiss. But sadly, many trees beside where these sites were, beside holy wells, sacred wells, they've also become trees for banging in coins and for banging in nails, banging stuff up. Our local holy well is really bad for that. People put hanging baskets and sort of little Jesuses on a very vintage ash tree. I find that very sad. And there was a tree filled with coins by the well at Mountrath in County Laois. That's it there. Sort of an ancient picture. Here's a modern one of it. This is Mountrath in County Laois. And that was, or it may still be, it's St. Fintan's Well. I think I got something there. There we go. There's an old picture of St. Fintan's Well there. And a sycamore tree was planted by that well, or it actually found its way there to where the well is. And so you might be able to see there's sycamores there. And the well re-emerged around the tree. And then people still wanted to bang nails into it, so they would jump over the well and they would stick. Talking of stick, my screen's stuck. There we go. And they would jump over the well and stick coins into the tree. And they would believe that this would return to them the wish of blessings, prosperity, and luck. Now, these wishing tree traditions, some wassailing traditions, are still existing in modern Christmas tree traditions today. And that's why I went on about them on and on. You think, well, what's he on about? It's supposed to be about Christmas trees. I was giving you a bit of background there because we hang baubles on our Christmas trees. And they represent the apples to bless us and return our wishes. And some people still hang real apples on their trees. Here's a couple of examples. There's some sliced apple and there's some real apple hanging around a tree there. And that's going back to what the baubles were doing. And we hang chocolate coins on trees as well. And these, come on. Sorry about this flicking on and off. I don't know why this is happening. It's been sort of growing over the weeks. I'm going to have to look into it. Anyway, there we go. It's holding there chocolate coins on the trees, which is representative of those coins being banged in trees. I think this is another example. Oh, that's a good way of doing it, isn't it? Don't bang them in the tree, just put them in a cone and hang them. There we go. And this is representing the gifts of coins that were once gifted by the lairds. and collected during wassailing when the wassailers and wassailers went from door to door after they blessed the trees. And there was a time when carols were sung at the wishing trees. I don't have a picture of that, unfortunately. And this was before coins and gifts were put in and around a tree. So it's all part of the begging and collection. Also, as I've mentioned, on top of these celebration trees, we place the 4 and 5 pointed stars, angels, fairies. But what do we place at the bottom? And what else do we put on the tree and why? Now, I'm going to talk about that after. I'm going to talk with our lovely first guest who's waiting patiently from New York, Jessica Bowman. I hope I pronounced that right. So here's Jessica. We haven't had a sound test, so I hope this works out okay. Sorry, I'm trying to get through, but the computer is playing up here. I have to use three computers. I use 3 computers, so it is a disaster waiting to happen, isn't it? Anyway, Jessica, how are you doing now? I better put my headphones on.
Hi, John.
The system. Let's see how you're going. You're looking well and truly. How are you? Good. Well, it's good morning to you, isn't it?
It is good morning. Hi, good morning from Brooklyn, New York.
Yes. Brilliant. As I say, it got started up because of your beautiful. I'm going to throw it up again. Your where I came and found your beautiful painting representing this time of year. There we go. I'm going to just throw that again. I was absolutely moved by that. Of the symbolism of that to remind people just to let go, hibernate, and treasure this time. And I know this is something I do myself because I save all my writing and composing and all the best stuff. And I look forward to the downtime because I must admit I'm not a major consumable Christmas person myself. So tell me your thoughts of how and why you created that painting. Or it is a painting, is it?
It's a drawing. Yeah. First, I want to say it's great to come in today because I have been to those wishing wells. I've been to the Clutie Well in Scotland, and my next trip to UK, I wanted to visit those trees, the money trees. I was really
Oh
interested
dear.
in that tradition. Yeah, no joke. I wanted to make a drawing based on it. I wanted to take a trip back to UK before the pandemic hit, where I was going to visit all of these folklore sites and make a series of drawings related to them. So, how interesting that you invited me here today. So, thank you so much.
Well, there must have
Um,
been a link just by that drawing here. Are you going to come to Ireland to see what we got here? Because we've got a lot here, of course.
yes, I've been to Ireland one time. I'd love to come back as soon as it's safe to travel again. I'm certainly going to come back. So, thank you for having me. So that drawing, it's called Bedtime Stories.
Oh,
This is the
wow.
copy that hangs in my
Ah,
bedroom
lovely.
because it's a good image to have in the room where you sleep, especially since I suffer from insomnia.
Ah,
Um, but I made that image 8 years ago in the wake of a pretty bad illness where I thought I was going to lose the use of my hands, because I had an illness that was eating up the nerves in my hands and in my feet. And I was really afraid that I was going to lose the ability to draw. And it made me go through a really difficult period emotionally. I was living in the city, which I wasn't enjoying at the time because I'm a nature girl, and I've been living in New York City for the last 11 years. I love it now, but it took me a long time. And so when I realized that I still had the ability to draw, I wanted to make an image that really spoke to my emotional longing at that point. Now, believe it or not, even though everybody sees this as a winter picture, which it is, I actually made it in the middle of the summer. Um, I was thinking about what I was missing, which was the feel of the earth beneath my feet without concrete underneath it, being able to look up into the sky and see the stars, which you can't see in New York City. And that was a tremendous longing for me. It was almost a grief. And this drawing went through many manifestations in my mind that were actually much darker. And then this is what came out. It wasn't what I had planned. What ended up coming out was something that felt very comforting. I wanted to use all of the animals that you find in the fairy tales. I don't know if you noticed this, but bears and
Yeah.
foxes and goats, they show up in the fairy tales a lot. And plus, I wanted to have animals that you could expect to be nocturnal or to hibernate or something like that. Um, so the little girl in the burrow is reading Grimm's fairy tales. That's what she's reading, the book of fairy tales. Um, and everybody else is sleeping. And it's interesting now that I suffer quite badly from insomnia that she's awake while everyone else is sleeping. um,
There's a couple of things that you were saying. One of the things I bring up on Nature Folklore when we go into on series is the whole yin yang, because there's a lot of people, when we do the tree season, lots of people were fascinated by those who have been speaking for a few years of everything networking and connecting together in the forest. But if they look closely, that's what's going on underground with the roots. And
yes.
that's the dark side. And of course, you've got the inside, you've got the underworld, you're not seeing the light. Whereas up above, everything is racing to get to the light. And it's a bit of a vicious thing out there. It becomes very much the yang. I bring in that comparison of seeking for the light. But when you're in the competitive light, you just wish to hibernate. And there's that combination. And you're saying about the animals hibernating. Of course, the goats, they don't
Goats
hibernate.
don't hibernate. No, they don't. That's
No,
why the
we're
goat is
coming on.
awake.
Yeah, we're coming into Capricorn now, and this is when the wild goats and even the farm goats start breeding. All the kids are born now, so I find that interesting, the symbolism of this time relating to goats, and as you say, and Grimm's. I kind of am always knocking Grimm's for. Grimm seems to scare people. Grimm's has taken some of the darkest Scottish stories, taken nature folklore, mixed the two of them, and it's as if the Grimms are scaring the children out of the woods into castles, into prisons.
That's interesting.
So I'm not a great Grimm's fan myself.
Well, that's interesting because so I'm half German and I lived in Germany as a kid. And so I
Oh
always
wow.
really loved the Grimm's fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel that they scared me away from the forest. It made the forest something that was really alluring to me
Well, that's
because,
great.
yeah, well, we have our modern forests, which are very different than the medieval forests, right? I mean, our modern
Yes.
forests are trimmed down. They're not the dangerous places they were, the dark places of the fairy tales where these
They haven't got
adventures
much
would
life in them
happen.
anymore.
Right.
In the
But
modern
in their
plantation,
time,
anyway.
you could get lost in the forest, right? You could meet creatures that would scare you in the forest. And that was really exciting to me to think about the world in this wilder time. The forest is the place that makes me feel the absolute happiest in the world. I feel completely peaceful there. Um, so living in the city has been really difficult for that because I don't have that ability to kind of just go and level out. Like I feel myself just kind of come down to a gentle place. I'm not grumpy. I'm perfectly contented when I'm surrounded by all of those trees. So quite a lot of my artwork features trees in it. I don't know if you went through
I
my
was
website, but
browsing what I could. Yes.
yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I really that's what's interesting to me. Really, I mean, I find them they're these living, communicating creatures that we don't really understand. And I have had some strange experiences in forests that it makes you feel like there's something more to the world than what you see. Oh, look at
whoops.
that. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yes.
That was an image that I made actually based in New York City.
All
Um,
right. We got
yeah,
the goats.
that's a bridge that's my Billy Goat's Gruff drawing that I located in Central Park in New York City. So
Yeah, that's incredible. It's lovely because I really wanted to. It was me jumping out at this amazing picture because it really, I suppose, it spoke to me. It spoke to a few people. I thought, yes, someone's really interpreted what this time really is, and very close to me. And But I find it fascinating, as you say, you actually were dreaming of this in summer. And sometimes I must admit myself, in the height of intensity, not during the COVID times, but when there's a lot of activity, I think, oh, I can't wait to get back into my hibernation and start
Yes,
writing and reading again. It's so you kind of look forward to
absolutely.
it.
I
And
do.
you overcome the loneliness that was mentioned. So that's fantastic. Now, it's lovely to talk to you, that, and it's lovely what you just said. I'd love to be able to invite you back. When do we do it? We have I think it's a 6-week tree season through March. I'd love to have you back for that because of your connection to trees. I hope you can come back to us for that.
Sure, of course.
See where you are. Again, I wish I had longer. I've got Tony Cookson, and it's a long show, but it was lovely to meet up with you and got the insight to what you do. And I haven't got your website up, so when I finish the show, I'm going to put the link, or maybe you can put it into the comments yourself.
I'll put it
And
in right
oh,
now.
books we haven't talked about. You're a writer. You got books out as well, haven't you?
Yes, I have one book. Hold on, I'll get it for you. It's called The Lions at Night. It's again another nighttime image. I'm very interested in the concept of a generative night season. I'm also a fall baby, so the thought
Whoops.
of the winter and the fall, the dark seasons, is something really creative, is really interesting to me. And that's what this drawing has come to mean to a lot of people, even though I don't think I ever put that out in words, but that's how people have interpreted it. So it's great that it touches a lot of people, and I'm really thankful for that.
Well, B. Smith, she says she loves winter hibernation time. A hell of a writer, and she's a guest with us sometimes. We've got her husband Tony on very shortly, and then we got Amy Bourne Pollitt. I hope I got
That's
that
my
right.
sister. Yeah.
All right. So she's made a lot of comments. She sort of loves that you're here. From Bremen's lovely, and Ken is love this drawing and gaze at it often. There we go. And Gold Jess here, Joshua Bowman, and Sherry Murphy. That's someone you obviously know. Beautiful art there, and of course, Bees saying how gorgeous it is. We've got Les Lynch coming in from YouTube here. Lovely art. Amy with a big wow there. And I need a money tree. Yeah, let's not waste the money in the tree. Let's use it to preserve the tree, maybe. My big brother lives by the bridge, says Barbara. And here we go, like you were saying, it's my sister. The comment was there, but it's not coming up. There we go. That's my sister there. I can see. I wonder where all these comments were coming from. Now I know. I can't wait for a good friend. There you go, Dennis Kingston as
Who's coming in
well.
from Ireland there? Yeah,
Is that right?
he's in
There's a
Wicklow, yeah.
yes. There's Lee Lynch coming in from Dallas there. Right. That's fantastic. We'll get you back in March, and I'll contact you before then. So thank you so much for your
Thank you, John.
little but very full contribution to this afternoon. That was wonderful. That's
Thank you. It
lovely.
was so
Thank you,
much fun.
Jessica. Thank you. Oh, wonderful, Jessica there. I'll be glad to when we can get back to her again. And Jessica is, jessicabowman.com. She's going to put it up. I don't know. I can't do while I'm broadcasting, strangely enough, I can't put comments in. So I have to wait until after the show. So that was fascinating. What comment? Who haven't I spoken to you? We got Alice Snow Faye, who's in from Dallas. We got Mrs. Seven Serpents listening while working, enabling others in their gluttony. Goodness me. There was a Ken who's saying hello to Sherry here, friend of Sherry as well. So we're going to have Tony on shortly, but I'd like to say a little bit more about the Christmas trees, like I was saying, for a few more minutes. Let's see what we got here. Now, sometimes at the base of Christmas trees, let's sort the comments out here. We have some surprises. I don't know if there are surprises, maybe of traditions. Sorry, I'm going through the tech stuff. There we go. We place a doll of a baby. Sometimes we put it there at Yule, and is to celebrate the conception of Christmas. And the Christmas Day for birth of Christ, of course. And of course, most people are aware now that Jesus Christ was not born on the 25th of December. But it's a symbolism that still draws a passionate response from millions of people. And some people will merge the pre-Christ thought of this being is our change towards the lighter days of and Christ is representing as a symbol of light to a lot of people. Of course, on solstice, it's not a strict shortest day, and it's not quite as simple as that, because let's see if I can get this the right way around. I should put this down. I'll look into it. The sun set is at the same time for around 11 days after the solstice, but before the solstice for about 10 days it's the sunrise that stays stable. So it's a very slow process before it gets going. This isn't a sort of, doesn't have boundaries, it's a transition, and a lot of people don't realize what a slow transition it is, although the point of the grand conception is still the point of solstice, and I'll talk about that closer to solstice. But I think there's a very ancient belief around the world that the spirits of our children come from trees, and even born from trees. And there are many world traditions, a lot of them have now faded away, but believe that every newborn child is associated with a new sprouted or a new deliberately planted tree. And each rite of passage of life after birth becomes connected and celebrated with that tree. And even this is 10 years ago, this is my granddaughter, and this is her oak tree. And she comes to visit it every year, usually around the solstice time. I'm not sure, I think she's 5 or 6 there. She's now 12. But visiting our tree and connection to our tree for all our rites of passage, entering adulthood, engagement, going into partnership, wedding, union, celebrating births, and of course our passing over is right by our tree. And people deposit parts of themselves onto these trees, like hair is common, or fragments from clothing are used too. And this is a tradition here, of course, the ragwort trees, and people hang all sorts of strange and peculiar stuff. Some of it doesn't go back to nature. There's a lot of plastic being put onto these trees now, unfortunately. But many communities believe, or they did believe, that our spirits pass on to the chieftain trees like the oak, ash, elm, and from the water that fades from us at death. So our spirits leave us through the water, and it's said that our bodies go back to the trees. There's a lot of belief around the world to that. And trees are often believed to be where we can pass on our sickness and illness, because our sickness and illnesses can't harm the trees. So during these visits to wishing, kludgy, rag trees, there is a faith that we can be released from sickness if we deposit parts of our hair or fragments from our clothing onto these trees. And they're usually hung, but sometimes they're pushed into holes or into splits in the trees, not actually hung. The people put them in to be part of the tree, and then they dissolve. If it's a natural fiber or a grass or hair, it will just dissolve into the trees. So that is a sort of long-term healing tradition. And some local traditions believe that if anybody ill lays beside their dedicated tree and go to sleep, they'll actually receive vivid dreams of what they need to do to be healed. Now, among tree blessing wisdom is also the holly and ivy, and they're very huge winter solstice symbols before Christianity. And with the arrival of Christianity, singing holly and ivy in our homes for solstice or Christmas was actually banned, and bringing a holly and ivy was actually banned, except in Protestant UK and Germany. But it was the Christian world actually banned the holly and ivy. But before Christianity, from the fragments we know, holly was regarded as the winter king, and ivy was the queen of winter. There's the ivy. And neither of these greens were allowed into homes until the solstice celebrations had passed. And there was a gender challenge too. If holly was in the home before ivy, the eldest male of the home ended up ruling the household for the following year. And if the ivy got in first, then the eldest female ruled. Now, that tradition was more within the Midlands and north of England, so it was concentrated there. Ivy was not allowed in during Christian Christmas at all, but was encouraged to be hung outside. And by hanging ivy outside, it said that it protected the household from lightning, fire, and all kinds of evil weather things, such as storms, through the solstice and Christmas time. Now, mistletoe, I'm going to put mistletoe in, I'm going to change my green screen, and let's get some mistletoe in it whilst I'm talking about this. But mistletoe was included, it was for holly and ivy union, was why the mistletoe was brought in. I'm just going to change that for you, and I'll come back. So the mistletoe would enter the home first, and then you would bring in the holly and ivy, and the union would take place. And the mistletoe was believed to bless fertility and ignite light and encourage the new incubation of new life that's being born at this time, and protect us against the darker spirits of the eternal dark and the barrenness at this time. Now, the Christian retranslation in UK and Germany, it was that holly was of Jesus' crown of thorns. There's something to read about it. And ivy is a reminder to cling to God for support and guidance through our lives. But here we go. This is our holly use I prefer rather than that Christian interpretation. Anyway, when the tradition of giving food gifts by the lairds to the peasant land workers changed to inviting them to the kitchen to all join together in the house for some Christmas dinner, and people dined in a place away from the gentry, of course. And in that hall, the peasants were encouraged to hang a wreath. That's the sort of wreathing they were done. And they would have a wreath. They would start off by weaving thin ash and hazel branches, and then the holly and ivy would weave into the ash and the hazel. And this is what they would have above them on their dinner that was supplied by the lairds. And the lairds themselves, they would have similar, but they would have rosemary weaved into them, because rosemary was regarded as Mary's favourite plant. And the peasants were sometimes commissioned to make the same wreaths to hang over their feasting tables as well. Now, one final tree custom story. And once a tree was put up in the home for Christmas, it seemed like all of the hidden spiders in the home would come out, and they would weave webs all over the tree. And so it's said that when Santa or the fairies or the Sidhe would see this beautiful green tree being darkened up with all these spiders' webs being formed. Now, of course, they wouldn't remove the spiders' webs because they had every right to be on the tree as everyone else looking at it. So it's said that either Santa or the fairies or the Sidhe, who wanted to be kind to spiders, they cast a spell and it made all of their webs sparkle like silver. And apparently that's why we put tinsel on Christmas trees. Anyway, it's time for Tony Cookson. And it's so delighted to have Tony Cookson here on Nature Folklore, because I know some of you are Tony Cookson fans. Just going to have a quick look to see if there's something very... let's see what someone has said something here. I was hoping Ludo would intrude. That must be an in-joke, and I can't get that one up. Anyway, that must be the dog. Dog must be called Ludo, Jessica's dog. That's what I assume there. Sorry about that. We would have called Ludo on if I'd known. Sorry about that one. Anyway, Tony, let's try and get my earphones on, and we'll have the Tony on, because this is going to be fun. To actually have Tony Cookson live on Nature Folklore is very special. Tony, let's see if we got you loud and clear. Good afternoon, Tony. You look very wintered up there. How you doing?
Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're very clear. You're
Can
a
you hear
little
me?
dark, but your voice is
A
very
little
clear
dark.
there, which is great.
Well,
Yeah, carry on.
it's lovely to be with you because you're my favorite bard, right? Hello,
Hello
everybody.
there.
This
Yes,
is
very
George.
good.
He's
Hi,
accompanying me
George.
on this storytelling, and yeah. So story. Thanks for all the information. You've given me probably enough material there to write 3 or 4
Oh
stories
goodness.
that.
Oh, you wait till I get on. I haven't touched the mischief of mischief. As I said, this is going to be a long show today. But anyway, before we get on to the mystery, the mischief of mystery, I understand you got a riddle story for us.
I do have a riddle story for you. I wrote this story many. Actually, it's probably one of the first stories I ever wrote. I used to love writing this story about this young woman. I have this idea. I still have this idea that a lot of stories are about heroes, whereas I like to have my stories involve heroines.
Yes.
And I did a series of stories which I loved, which was about a young girl, and her name is Aggie McPartland, right? And she's the hero of many of these stories, right? So here's a story, an Aggie McPartland story. It's called King of the Fairies. So before we get into this story, it's an experience of imagination. So imagine this. Imagine that you are taking a journey and you take the first step through what is called the gateless gate. And through the gateless gate, you go into a field. And this is a field that is called the field beyond right doing and wrongdoing. And there at the center of this field, there is a fire. And it is a fire that burns no wood. And there, sitting by the fire, is an old Shanashi, an old storyteller. He's called the Dream Seller. And he's going to sell you a dream for the cost of another dream. The dream that keeps you imprisoned. The one that tells you that you are ever separate from love. And so, as you sit by this fire that burns no wood, he begins to tell you a story, and the story is called The King of the Fairies. And like all good stories, it starts with a line that says, once upon a time. And once upon a time, there was a child. Her name was Aggie McPartland, and she met the King of the Fairies. And the first time she met the King of the Fairies, the king wasn't very impressed with her. You see, she had big feet. And in the land of fairy, big feet are not made for dancing. Now, Aggie asked the King of the Fairies, "Where am I? Where am I?" And the king answered, he says, "You are in the most magical place that is everywhere and nowhere at the same time." And Aggie says, "Do you know, you talk in riddles." And the king says, "Well, it's far better to talk in riddles than to talk in the half-brained way that mortals talk. At least in riddles, you're talking with your full brain. Aggie says, I want to go home. I don't want to be here that is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I want to be home. And the king says, well, you can't go home. You can only go home if you give us something new. What would you give us that is new? And Aggie doesn't know. And the king suggests, well, maybe you could give us a new dance. And then he thinks, well, no, not with her feet. And what about giving us a riddle? And Aggie thinks and knows that she knows no riddles. And so the king puts her under a magic spell whereby she will come to know a riddle that has meaning for her. And she sleeps a little. And when she wakes, the king says, well, now, little girl, have you got a riddle for us? And to her surprise, Aggie says, oh, yes, I have a riddle. I have a riddle indeed. And so everyone in fairyland is excited at the possibility that there will be something new come into fairyland. And before she shares the riddle, as tradition demands, the rules of the riddle must be laid out from the rules of the great book of fairy riddles. And the rules are these. The riddle must be spoken twice. In the time for an hour, that is mortal time, those who have heard the riddle must explore it and come to an answer. If they do not have an answer, then this riddle is written in the great book of fairy riddles, and there is a great celebration at the arrival of something new in fairyland. And so the rules are read out to the gathered fairies in the land of fairy. And the king then calls on the young girl, Aggie McPartlin, to share her riddle. And the riddle is this. So listen carefully. What is the longest and shortest journey that only the blind who can see must take? And you repeat it. What is the longest and shortest journey that only the blind who can see must take? Everything's silent, and the hourglass is turned, and the time begins for those to solve the riddle. And the king gathers with his wisest of people, and within a minute they have the answer to the first part of the riddle because it's elemental fairy lore. The longest and shortest journey any fairy knows is from time to the timeless. The king's a bit disappointed that it took so little time to solve this part of the riddle. But then there is the second part of the riddle which says that only the blind who can see must take. 5 minutes to the end of the hour, no one has come up with an answer to the riddle. And so, under the rules of the great book of fairy riddles, it is placed out into the general floor for anyone to answer. And the king asks, has anyone an answer to this riddle? And there is silence. And then there's a rustle at the back. And there's the fairy, called Two Flat Feet, who's a changeling from the other world, comes forward coughing and he says, "Your Majesty, King of the Fairies, I think I have the answer." And the king beckons 2 left foot forward, and he whispers in the king's ear the answer to the riddle. Time ends. The hour is up. And now it is time to announce the answer to the riddle. And the king, in his most celebratory, kingly voice, says, "The answer to the riddle: what is the longest and shortest journey that only the blind can see, who can see must take, is..." There's silence. And the king announces, "It is the journey of the bat. It is the journey of the bat." And there is silence. And all the fairies start to shuffle. And there's whispering. What does that mean? For no one has ever heard of a bat. The king's embarrassed, and he calls forward 2 left feet and he says, "What do you mean by the journey of the bat? What is a bat?" And 2 left feet say, "Well, your honor, your kingship, it's a creature that is blind but can fly in the dark, so it must be able to see." The silence. No one in fairyland has ever heard of a bat. And so, under the rules, look up in the dictionary to find the word bat, and it can't be found. And therefore, the answer must be disallowed. And so, the king goes to the young girl, Aggie McPartland, and he says, "Child, is the answer to the riddle the journey of the bat?" And the child answers, "No, your kingship, that's not the answer. Therefore, child, you must declare the answer to the riddle, and we will have something that is new in the land of fairy, and there will be celebration." And so, Aggie McPartland declared the answer to the riddle as the longest and shortest journey is the journey of the heart. For it is only those who see through the heart who are not blind. And she repeated this again. And everyone was satisfied with the answer, and there was much celebration. And the dancing began, and the king took the young girl and danced with her, and they danced and danced until the king and Aggie McPartland disappeared. And on the banks of the river where she had lay asleep and fallen into fairyland, he put a spell on her to forget that she had ever been there. And as a present, she wrapped around her neck red dancing shoes, that when she put them on, she would feel she was dancing inside. And then she awoke and ran home, and her mother was glad to see her. And she said, "Aggie, where have you been?" And Aggie replied, "Mummy, I've been everywhere and nowhere." And Aggie's mother thought, "Do you know, sometimes my child talks in riddles." And so you have the end of the story of the king of the fairies. And thank you for taking time to listen.
Absolutely marvelous. Wonderful to actually have a Tony Cookson story here on Nature Folklore, which is a wonderful treat. And a few fans here, Sherry saying biggest Tony and B fan, and Terry Slack Hardwick. Tony Dearheart, you're looking wonderful. And then,
yes, I am looking wonderful.
Davida woke up and came in, said hello. Breezy Kelly's here. She's going to listen on the replay. A lot of people are going to be surprised and delighted. So thank you very much for that, Tony. That was a real treat to come on with that. Gary loved it, of course. He would, Tony. Great story, says Gary Brannigan. Absolutely fantastic. And we'll have you again, I'm sure. So thank you very much. And I'm sure I'll chat to you before, but a wonderful solstice for you and B.
Anytime you have a thing, let me know. I might write it. I haven't written a story forever. So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Tony. Yes, okay. Everyone. That's brilliant. Tony Cookson there, which was great to have him. And as I say, this was actually titled this today, Mischief and Magic, and I haven't even started yet. So I hope you enjoy the overtime as I now get on to what this was supposed to be about this afternoon, because we had these wonderful guests with Tony and Jessica earlier. Fantastic. And as I say, I titled Mischief and Magic. So let's get on with some of both. And we're talking about mummers, straw boys, wren boys, and there's Bees come on and said, my guide, as she often says. There you go. Well done, Bee. Excellent. So, mummers, let's get to back to my pictures here. Street mummers, people are familiar with in the USA. If I say mummers, that's the impression I think of what the USA might have. They're kind of pantomime parades, but people parading dressed up in costumes and wearing masks, something a little bit Mardi Gras, isn't it? It happens in December, especially in Pennsylvania. So, the origins of mumming is what I'm going to talk about. It's very, very different to those vast parades. In fact, what I'll do to get into the mood of it is bring up a mumming background for you into my green screen. Now we're on some mumming. Let's see. Let's choose one of the mumming backgrounds. Let's have this one. We haven't had this one. There's a grand one to have, isn't it? Oh, excuse me. No, I'll do that one. There we go. So where's it gone? Anyway, the origins of mumming, as I say, there is folk drama. It goes way back to the Bronze Age, or even before. And mumming was done, or the folk dramas were done as an expression to inform the people of the seasonal changes. It was done partially as entertainment, done as reminders, and it's as if, folk drama is what I started all this with. I started as a child, 6, 7 years old. I was a gallishing, and as I was explaining, around at Samhain time, Halloween time, because in Scotland that was very much what you joined, and it was the children that sort of did it quite a bit, and learning these stories and learning about the characters, bringing them all together and trying to interpret through drama what really went on in these ancient times. So that's how I got involved in this world of folklore, mythology, and storytelling. It's through these folk dramas that became the Galicians, became the Guises, became mummers, and so forth. And friends joined in with me, and they absolutely loved it. Actually, they told me more about it from their school memories, primary school and secondary school. Stuff I've totally forgotten, but for some reason ingrained in their minds and has been important to them through their lives. As much I could talk about that, and I am getting on. So I'm going to try and release small videos for subscribers on it while I move on to giving you some of the basics before we close up today. So I was hoping for Jim Ledwith of Orchakilly Mummers of Fermanagh to be here. We might have had to have him for another time, but here's Jim. A lot of people might be familiar with him, but he says he's now strictly day off on Sunday. He doesn't do anything, so we wouldn't get him anyway. But Jim's part of a team that's putting together quite a lovely Zoom presentation. It's coming on Thursday. Maybe you'd like to catch up with him and what he does with that. So there's the poster they've been putting out. Anyway, let me start with the bare bones of the tradition storyline of the mummers and the folk drama in general. This I did go over when I spoke about the Scottish Gaelic traditions over Sawan, but I'll do it again with some different pictures. Now, first, the folk dramas need someone to actually open the space, create the circle, draw up a performing circle, used often with chalk, sometimes just marking out with a stick. And this is done with a broom to start with. So you sweep the area with the broom before you mark the circle. Everybody's got to keep out of it because that's the performing area. And then over time, the people doing this that was marking out with the broom, and that's what I got in the green screen here. Biddy, the biddy or the hag. There was the biddy's hag or the kayak. Or sometimes it was Beelzebub, the clown, jester, even a ringmaster or a mistress. They did the circle. They opened up the circle. And then the main characters are brought in one by one, and there's at least two of them. And this is something I was mentioning. Two of them take on the lead roles. The first is the so-called hero. And in earliest days, this would be the local chieftain. Later, it became fighting kings and knights and people that were regarded as the good heroes by the local people. And then the second was the sparring challenger. And the sparring challenger there, lots of booze when that person came on. It was someone that local people didn't like very much. But the second character represents a lot of opposition, suppression maybe, and even symbolic of the forced requisition of lands and the enforced tax payments, all of the stuff that we're still fighting over today, where the elite are trying to take everything from us. You know, this is nothing new. And the mummers actually acted this out. That was the enemy. Anyway, and for example, you got people like Robin Hood and the Sheriff of Nottingham, or you go back to ancient times where you have Lugh the Long Arm against Balor, and even Cuchulainn and Ferdia was brought into these battles. And there's an outdoor battle scene there amongst the rivals. But unfortunately, a common opposing pair from time to time was a crusader knight, such as King George, sometimes called Hector, against an Arab or a Turkish knight who was called Slasher. So unfortunately, the Christian and Islamic thing was around for a long time, and the mummers sort of do this. But of course, Scotland turns this around a bit, and the hero is a dark Hades type character that I was sometimes, the Galashin. And no wonder I'm a dark worker these days. I was the Galashin as a kid. But a dark worker, of course, is here to help out the light workers. You couldn't have a complete wholesomeness without that. But in the Republic of Ireland, especially in northern counties, St. George has been swapped from being a hero into being a villain. And St. Patrick is sometimes the hero over George. And there he is there. He's wiped out George there. And do I have another picture of that? No, I don't. I thought I did. I took one out because I was told I had too many pictures on for this show. Anyway, I'm surprised there isn't a Grania versus Draken version. Maybe we'll have to do one. But women were generally kept out of these battle roles. But there are Georgian dragon versions in Mummers as well. And in the southeast, I believe, still in County Wexford, the battle hero characters have been Colm Gill, Brian Boru, Art McMurrough, Wolf Tone, and even Roger Emmett. And records indicate that this type of mumming could have gone back 2,500 years in Ulster. As it described, the men in tall conical masks, they entertained the court of King Connor on Emma during the winter solstice. And that could be up to 2,500 years ago. So it wasn't just the planters that brought it in. And of course, today, to celebrate that near Emma, we've got the ancient tradition of the Armagh Rhymers. There they are. And they're very famous now. And Today they wear wicker-made conical hats, and there's horses' heads and other animals' heads. Absolutely beautiful. So this is the basics of the Mummers drama. I'll go over some of this now. You get a barbaric fight that takes place, and they use wooden swords now, and then the hero gets killed. Well, the hero doesn't get killed. Oh dear, come on, picture, get back up again. No, sorry, we're going into wobblies again. The hero kills the villain, and of course there's goes up, and people are absolutely thrilled about that. And so there's lots of cheers. And up to this point of the script, it's been rhyming poetry. The hero and the villain, they talk in rhymes. And up to that point, as I say, next comes in is the healer, the doctor. Well, he's doing the same thing there, isn't he? That man with the hat, he's the healer, he's the doctor. And here's an old representation of the healer. And this man comes on, and he doesn't talk in rhyme, he talks in nonsense prose, and he brags up to the audience about his past healing achievements, how he's brought people back from the dead and got rid of the pox, the blah, 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 and all his achievements of all the illnesses he's got rid of and all the viruses and so forth, and using a lot of nonsense prose. I think that's going on today a bit, isn't it? Anyway, but he brings along a potion, and the doctor has this potion, and pours it into the villain's mouth there, and it goes into the throat, and the villain revives and comes back up and lives another day, and everything is wonderful. But instead of continuing the battle between the so-called hero and villain, there's actually a bonding that takes place, a forgiveness and a friendship, and together they hug each other in peace. And then the person who creates the circle, after all that, the hugging in peace, in comes that's the first lines with these people. In comes I'm St. George. So that's how the bumming play starts. One day I'll do a special mumming performance for the subscribers. I have to do that in a sort of slow-paced way. But the person who created the circle, Beelzebub, the hag, the biddy, after all that's done, goes around and collects the money. And just like I do at the end of every Nature Folklore, digitally urging more subscribers through Patreon and donate through the PayPal. And there we go. There's the Patreon down below. I'm going around the circle right now. But if you pause to think about this folk drama is not really about good guys and bad guys. It's performed this way because humans seem to like to be entertained by the thrill of barbaricness, could we call it that? And I like to think of these short folk drama plays as being possibly a process of inspiring balance, inspiring tolerance, forgiveness, and peace at this time. And I believe these folk dramas are aimed to bring us much, much more than just observing the passing of the past year into another year. It's certainly that comes into it because the villain perhaps would be the past year and the hero is the year that's coming ahead. And this little drama, I think, is performed around Yule time now. And that's the main transition moment between the past year cycle entering into the Samhain year cycle. We talk about that through Samhain, don't we? But Samhain is the last harvest when everything's put to sleep, and we have this period between Samhain and Imbolc. But right in the middle, we have this grand conception time of Yule, and that's what this little drama is the passing of Yule, really. In older and more ancient versions, it seems this was a fertility rite. This drama was really a fertility rite, and that was the main intent of the most ancient of these performances. So the battle part of the story originates as a kind of a wooing mating dance, and sometimes the acting out of men competing for the same woman. That would come into that as well. So I think that's where the battle came in, was when there were men competing for the women. So that's when it became an aggression over the mating. Watch ducks. You'll see this, you'll find drakes will be fighting over the female duck. And that's sort of translated through, I think, through these human folk dramas. And there's even a lesson demonstrating that union and conception cannot be bonded until the suturing competition is sort of calmed a bit, is soothed into a calm. Otherwise, the mating won't happen. And now I could give more reason, purpose, and intent to these native folklore dramas, but that is some of them. I could go on for ages about this, but I won't. But there was someone a few years ago in Fermanagh who was very humoured by all this stuff. There he is here, and this is something that came up the next day. That was a few years ago. Now let's consider how these mummers and drama people, let's see, how they are dressed. Today, you may often see mummers in variations of modern style clothing, such as this sort of thing. Oh, I'd say modern style. Ragged clothes, whatever they could get hold of, wearing masks. But the revival, as you've seen from what I've been showing, is going back to weaving the old straw masks and costumes. A lot of people are learning how to do this. And a lot more people learning thatching skills because this is used with the straw left over from the harvest, of course. And now this makes sense. As I say, the straw is all it's left over from the strip of grain, and it's a resource from harvest. And there we have someone weaving hats there. He's in Fermanagh as well. And I think I've got a video for him somewhere. Let's see. A wee little clip of video. Let's show him doing his mask. That was a few seconds of our lad there making the masks. Fascinating. Now I've lost my place in the... Excuse me as I get to their mask making. Now, the idea, of course, is so people wouldn't be able to identify them. The different characters with the straw, though they're not wearing costumes for the roles they're playing, they'd be identified by something on the straw. It could be a badge or a different weave of costume, or by wearing a specific dried plant. That's how you know who the different characters are. And as I say, I showed the mask making going on. The purpose of wearing masks. Well, that's for disguise, of course, not being identified. And the players who do the mummers ritual annually, they try to keep secret who's who. They try to keep it secret from the people they visit, who they are. And that's to sustain their command and their mystique during their performance. Mystery people like this, they're believed by the audience then that they are a mystery. Who are these people? And that's why I call this mischief and mystery, because the audience, they're being enchanted to believing that these folk drama players have been sent by the Sidhe, and even the dead from the underworld. Or are they fairies that are calling around in the costumes? They're not to be messed with, whoever they are. And that doesn't work if the audience recognizes that in the folk drama troupe, look, they're sure the postman, Seamus, the local plumber. The whole mystery is messed up, isn't it? So there's much more respect and attention was upheld for performers if they were kept secret than if a player was immediately identified as a local farmer or a farmer's boy. So there was respect for the mystery. So for several years, I was fascinated by the scripts that were used by mummers and other folk drama groups. So during many years before there was internet, before there was public internet and Google, I used to look up mumming scripts in various libraries. I used to go to the Cecil Sharp House in Camden Town in London. Also, there's a lovely folklore reference library in Hereford, in Herefordshire. Both of those are in England, of course. And there is a wee museum in Wales, but that's a private one. I used to go to that as well. Now, the biggest surprise was how mummers' placed scripts helped to establish the printed broadsheet, because printing in the 19th century, printers have suddenly got cheap, just like home computers suddenly got cheap in the 80s here, especially in the 90s. So the printing machines got cheap. People could start up businesses, home businesses, printing, but there wasn't investigative journalists. They couldn't put out sort of controversial stuff and stories like they do now and news of the world. It just wasn't the connections. So what they used to do was print broadsheets of old folklore, of these old folk dramas, and they would sell these on the streets. And what people did, because it was printing, you know, it's nice to have a bit of printed stuff, because that was prestige way back 19th century. And you could show your neighbors, look, I bought some print. Yeah, and books were just starting to get circulated amongst the peasants. It wasn't just for the elite. So people have got these scripts. They got these mummers' scripts on them. And so what they would do is get their friends around. And even though this has been around, mumming and folk drama has been around for thousands of years, they would get people together to look at these scripts. The medieval scribes did write some mumming ideas, but they made them into mystery plays. They had to make it Christian, and they had to please their patrons. So they got changed into miracle and mystery plays. And they would go away with the folklore stuff, and they would bring in stuff like Adam and Eve and the Last Judgment and sort of biblical stories they were bringing, and those were, so you still got the heroes and villains, and you still get the barbarians, but it was in the Bible. They were Bible stories, and they weren't the 5 or 10 minute shows that the folk dramas are. These were performed at festivals, and there'd be a series of stories over several days, and this was done because it was regarded as an easier way to teach the Gospels and the Psalms to the peasants, is to get them along to these drama shows, and hours and hours they get of, instead of preaching and teaching, they would get this drama show, these miracle plays, and they found it chanted the people and got their imagination, and that was part of the whole Christian conversion process, was using this old ancient folk drama technique to get people into the church. And I suspect early traditional mumming actually learned from this. People were still keeping the folk drama going quietly amongst the peasants. So they used, they turned to these things, and they learned by them, and they used some of their methods to share the folk drama tales. And that's how I first started with storytelling. As I say, I was a Galatian, a dark person. Anyway, and I started it. So miracle and mystery, and even minister. Take those words, mystery, miracle, and minister. They're words from the Latin ministerium, and that means craft. And even witches, they practice the craft, so I find that unique. But groups of people performing the mysteries and miracles, they formed what we call guilds. And unfortunately, guild later became something more sinister, as their interpretation, they were connected to the church, so their interpretation by people was that it was of the church. You had to do as you were told. They were in charge of the local commerce. Guilds became more noted for being in charge of local commerce rather than teaching for the church. And the celebrations obviously changed. And now in 1458 in Dublin, it's quite interesting. For a few years, there was a festival called, well, I don't know what it was called, but it was held on Hogan's Green. And this festival was held, as I say, from 1458 for several years. It was held on Hogan's Green for a few days before the solstice, winter solstice, and they would keep going up until the Christmas Eve. Now, what happened on this festival in Dublin is they would actually bring several traditions of folk drama together. Country people would come in, and they'd actually perform their mummers' plays. And then the Carpenters Guild would come in, and they would present a nativity play. And tailors would get together and portray the Adam and Eve story. And there were bakers who presented the story of Ceres. Blacksmiths presented the story of Vulcan. And the clergy came together as the grand finale to perform the martyrdom of the apostles. So let's go back to modern mumming. From the early 19th century, as I say, people bought these scripts and from the street sellers, and they would gather their families together in groups of people. Sometimes they'd be outside if the weather was nice. There they are. I think that's gathering the families together anyway. And they would, in the villages especially, they would get these reenactment groups. They would read out, someone would be able to read in the group anyway. So they perform these scripts and put these reenactment groups and all kinds of stuff. And started off as entertainment. This was really the start of the Celtic Romantic years, remember. This was early 19th century. You got these scripts. You got new interpretations of the folklore. People were rewriting the stories they heard, made them more romantic, very much inspired by this folk drama tradition. They would bring out books, and then we get what the academics would called complete bullshit. The stuff that Yeats and all those people, they used to be involved in the Celtic Romantic reinterpretation of the old mysticism. So the way it worked for families, see if I can get something going here. There they go. The troupe would dress up, some of them being straw, but more often they'd get some raggedy clothes, whatever they could get together with. That's a modern version anyway, but that's what they would do. They would put the masks on, and then they would visit door to door to perform to each family in their neighborhood. And the Mummers Play ritual would be a sandwich, really, of songs, jokes, and tunes, along with a short ritual play, hero and villain play. And they gave a short 10, 15-minute show, and they would go door to door. But there was always the Guess Who, just like we have sometimes with the Geysers, sometimes in a worry-watered way at Halloween with a trick-or-treat. But this is trying to revive the old folk drama for the solstice. So they would visit homes, and there would be this guessing, who is this, who is that? And the mystery side of it was broken down very quickly, of course. Masks and helmets eventually come off. Everybody would reveal who they are, and there'd be a bigger crack before they move on to the next house or cottage. Now, the time of this type of mumming would also not necessarily be solstice. Sometimes it moved, well, often it moved to Epiphany time, as it would have integrated some of the older traditions of wassailing, Plough Monday, the sword dance ceremonies, and indeed the Scottish drama guises of Samhain and Halloween. So we're going backwards for that. And then we got the pacemakers and rhymers around Imbolc and Easter. So all of this was in mumming tradition different times. So you can really say that this started at Samhain with Scottish geysers, and there's different areas, different regions that would do different forms of this sort of mumming folk drama tradition. It'd get more sort of English and Welsh as we got towards the solstice. And then as we got towards Imbolc, and it got more sort of Irish again, although the west of England had the pacemakers. So this is keep going, to say, or with Easter, a lot of the Easter celebrations are right in this as well. After that, there was the Scottish Hogmanay of where there's first footing. I'm going to talk about this after Christmas, but it went on from the modern Christmas right through to the old Christmas, which is Epiphany. And I'll talk about first footing after Christmas, of course, but it's still part of the mumming tradition, but there's no costumes and masks. Now, with Hogmanay, the first one in the house had to be dark and carrying a lump of coal. Again, I'll talk about that on the 26th. The Halloween Scottish geysers, though, they may have come from an Irish tradition, as I explained back then, especially from around Meath at Samhain. So no wonder there are still mummers, straw boys and wren boys that still hang around in Ireland as well, especially around Dublin. There's a Dublin troupe there. Now, a lot of these folk drama traditions were abundant in Newfoundland as well. A lot of the Scots moved over into Newfoundland. But unfortunately, a troop of mummers there got aggressive and there was a murder. So that was the end of the old Scottish style folk drama tradition as it was. It just got wiped out in Newfoundland. But it's after people longed for it. And so in the 1980s, it came back to Newfoundland. But unfortunately, it was very different. They'd gone back into the sort of Mardi Gras style, like what Pennsylvania was doing. So the neighborly door-to-door crack had completely disappeared in Newfoundland with this revival. And even Samhain and Halloween, to match the Scottish geysers traditions, performances. That has really died out a lot. So the mumming that exists it's now very much a December tradition, and it kind of flows out into January at the time of wassailing. Now, it's worth pointing out that mumming has evolved, as I've been showing, I think, and it was around a long time before the printed broadsheets were published. And one outlet was the Punch and Judy shows. There we go, Punch and Judy shows. That was an outlet for the mumming. I know it came from Italy. It came to England around 16th century from somewhere in Italy, and the puppeteers then started making puppets based around mummers' characters. And they would do the mummers' scripts instead of the old Italian scripts. So they would act these out in Punch and Judy. If I can... Let go, I want another picture. There you go. There we go. So there we go. That's another Punch and Judy. Now, of course, the Punch and Judy shows, like everything else, has got watered down. So they're not doing the mummers' plays anymore. Punch and Judy shows. And then there's the pantomimes. Very similar. Came from Italy to England in the 16th century. Adapted the mummers' scripts, gave a more outlandish show. And we talked about the Grimm's fairy tales. They actually combined the mumming with the Grimm's fairy tales to come out with the there's the dame to come out with the pantomimes. And we can even go to the original Star Wars. Now, there's a surprise for you. Movies, they integrate the skeleton of the traditional mummers' play script. Before that, the Battle of Moytura. Let's do a bit of Moytura. The stories with Lou and Balor thrown in. That battle in duo also ended up with peace. They made peace with each other, Balor and Lou, thanks to a shaman being. And this is what happened, of course, in Star Wars. There's a battle with you're all familiar with, the old Darth there. And in the end, the two of them came together and they made peace. And anyway, that shows you how that tradition has traveled right up until now. And I'm trying to cut bits out because I know we're well over time here. This is going to have to be a thing I'm going to have to record. He's sporting a John Hardwick's beard. What a wonderful story that Tony can tell. It was really great. And I hope the people who have come on will go back and watch the entire Tony's story. Anyway, that's as much I think I ought to say about the mummers. It was a bit waffled, a bit rushed, but it was all part. I hope you got the gist of the mystery and mischief that all that was part of. And so coming up, as I say, this is part one of a 4-part series. And so, as I say, it's all brought to you. Thank you very much to our subscribers for allowing me to do this happening. A lovely session. The guests are amazing as usual. Thank you very much, Sherry. So coming up, we have next week, 12th of December, is part 2. And we have the reindeer folklore. That was very popular last year. And I'll see what we can do with that as well. I'm trying to find you a reindeer photograph, but our reindeer photograph hasn't really come up. Anyway, shooting the reindeer photograph, that's the 12th of December. And on that, it's going to be a topic of folklore that's really become very popular over the last 10 years. I'm going to be sharing stories and inspirations around people like Ocean the Bard, Ellen the Deer Goddess, and a lot more related deer tales. And then on the 19th, I got a picture to support that. Oh, the deer folklore's turned up. There you go. There's the deer folklore picture. And then on the 19th, we've got the log tales. We got some lovely guests for this one that are coming up. It's going to be a lot more than logs. Midwinter time, grand conception between the composting of past harvest remains and the germination of light and life for the next spring onwards, and when the fallen are rising again, just like what I've been talking about on the folk drama. A time of reverence for the tree of life and the slow burning Yule log, of course. and maybe some fun, tasty traditional recipes at that time as well, especially with ginger. Ginger is the important food, and ginger was only allowed in bread by law. Well, you couldn't use ginger by law I can't remember the dates, but by law in the UK, you couldn't use ginger all year round. It's devil's food. But you were allowed to put it into cakes during the solstice Christmas time. Hence why we got the gingerbread, because that's the time when ginger was legal. There's another wee tip as well. And then we go to part 4, which is just after Christmas. It's St. Stephen's Day here. It's Boxing Day in many other places. But I'm going to be ahead of myself. We got some great guests for them, but we're going to be first footing. I don't have a first footing picture, but we're going to also talk about the wassailing traditions, because early January people will be doing that. So I'll be talking about that, and that's the 26th. And my own personal experiences of first footing for several years on a Scottish island, along with wassailing for apple trees, around apple trees in Somerset, I do notice the similarities between the two. There's a common bonding of our essential personal affirmations, and that bonding it's all about our affirmations, which are personal, and as Tony was saying, from the heart. And what we all do is a trust and honesty is as if we bring that out and we share them with our community. And so first footing is very much a time of simple connecting and fellowship, and so is wassailing. It's like we bring out our hearts and join them together with our community, family, neighbors. And we even do this a bit during these COVID times, don't we? And we will do. There's also a lovely slow down and reconnect time, as we were talking about with Jessica, where we live and slow down in the landscape around us. And it's that landscape that provides for us if we respect it. So there is that slow down too. So it's very much, I hope, what I've been talking about. Just allow yourself to let go, avoid that loneliness, and really embrace that quiet and reflection time. And allow your heart to develop those lovely connections, those affirmations. And then when the time is right, don't think you've got to be out Christmas shopping, blah, 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 and connecting. When the time is right, utilize the spirit of things like the first footing and the wassailing to share your heart with the community. It's all about the survival at this time, sharing food, sharing fuel, sharing warmth, and how everything provides for you. Keep it simple. And I think that's what the overall waffling message was for today. So Terry Slack says, amazing episode. Wonderful, Jessica and Tony. Yes, thanks very much. I think they're both gone, but big applause for our guests, Jessica and Tony Cookson as well. And we'll have them on as well. Someone here is praising, but the message not coming up. Here we go. Lee, great presentation. Thank you. And I understand my connection tree is better, says Caroline. Oh, well, that's a lovely thing. Thank you very much for that. Have I missed anybody? Lovely. Roots and Mamas. I really had to waffle through that, Terry. I will try. I hope I can find time for videos to go into that a lot better. I'm going to put a link to Jim Ledwith. There's a nice Jim Ledwith video I didn't have time for. That I'll give you a link for that on YouTube, and that'll explain how it's done a lot more than I could this afternoon. Really enjoyed today's session, said Gary. Brilliant. Thanks very much to everybody. Thanks to all of you for being here. This is one of the longest ones I've done. I knew there was a lot of content with this. So thank you, Jessica Bowman. Thank you, Tony Cookson. Thank you, audience. If you're watching this, some of you have got to watch the archives. Please keep commenting. I do come back time to answer comments. Subscribe below. There's a bell icon. I think Facebook has one now, and it reminds you of the details of the next Sunday sessions. YouTube certainly does. So enjoy a wonderful, safe week. And then another comments come up. Adrian Foley, thank you. And the guest, great show, great insight and knowledge. Thank you very much for that. It's been wonderful doing this. There's so much. I could go on for hours with this. It's really painful trying to cut stuff out, but I should. There's a lot to this because, as I say, this is what I started off with, and that's how I got into this, what I do now. So until next Sunday, have a safe week full of wonder, great inspirations, great enchantments, great preparations for the real solsticing time with your affirmations and the lovely little company that you're keeping with and sharing with and celebrating with. So until next Sunday, thank you all. See you again next week for part 2 with the reindeer. And so here we go. Thank you. Bye-bye.